Hey everybody, it's author MD New, and I am back again with more writing tips and tricks for authors. So today I wanted to touch on the writing topic of creating races. And this basically goes for races that aren't human. So, either aliens that are out in the galaxy somewhere, or races here on Earth, like elves, dwarves, whatever. Um, so it's so the next couple things I'm going to talk about are all things to consider when you are writing a fantasy book or when you're writing a sci-fi book and you need to create a different species or a different race or something like that. So the first thing to think about is think about the world they come from. So, is this, in the case of an alien, what's their planet like? Do they have multiple moons, multiple suns? Is their gravity bigger or is their gravity bigger? Brilliant, yeah. Is their gravity stronger than ours, lighter than ours? Um, Keep in mind those types of things because it's going to affect the way the character looks, right? So if you're on a planet, let's say, that has a heavier gravity, well, they might be shorter, right, than regular humans. Or if they have a lower gravity, they might be taller because their bones are going to stretch out. So keep that in mind. That's just something that you want to think about as you do that. Now, when we're talking about other races of or species of like humans, if you're doing like a fantasy book here on Earth or something like that, you don't really have to worry so much about that, but you do have to think about where they come from. So are they, do these species live in the mountains? Do they live in deep caves? What's their eyesight like? Are they going to be just in total darkness? So you have and rely mostly on their hearing, on their sound, those types of things. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also, think about the flora and fauna that are around them. Everywhere has different types of animals and plants, even here on Earth. So you go to the desert and you're going to have a whole different world of animals and plants that are in a desert environment versus something like the Antarctic or the rainforest or something like that. So really think about what type of plants and animals that surround these beings that you're creating. What that's going to do is that's going to affect, you know, their clothing, how they dress, what they wear, what they don't wear, what they hunt, what they eat, those types of things. So really kind of spend a little bit of time thinking about that. I know for me, when I create specifically an alien race like I did in my A New World series, these are all things that I had to think about. I thought about, what their environment was like. Did they have, were they hunters and gatherers? Those types of things and how they developed from there. Another important thing that often writers forget is a religion. Sometimes, a species might have multiple religions. They might not have any religion, which is fine. It's just something to think about because think about how much faith affects us and in our world and the troubles and the problems that we see related around it. Also, the good that we have because of it, right? So there's going to be a mix. So if you have a race that has no religion, what does that look like? If you have a race that has multiple deities, what does that look like? And you can fall back here onto what we see here on our world, right? So kind of keep that in mind. It's something to play with and it's something to think about that a lot of times authors don't always remember. Now, the other thing is let's say you're creating an alien race, or even let's say you're creating a race of elves, right? Do they have subraces? For example, elves, they can have dark elves, you can have wood elves, you can have forest elves, you can have these types of things. So think about that too. There's nothing worse than having authors spend time creating a whole other world and you realize that there's only one type of species. It's like, really? So there's no variation in what these aliens look like. There's no height differences, no skin colors. So again, think about what we have here on Earth and think about how we do it and it's something else that's going to be mimicked elsewhere. So you're not just going to have one homogeneous group of beings, right? You're going to have diversity within them. Plus, what that does is that gives you the ability to decide if this causes any problems, if there's racial tension, if there's not racial tension, if they're gone completely beyond that. Infinite diversity is a good thing. Keep that in mind, and it's just something that you can play with in the book. It makes your world richer. The other big thing is give your new race or your new species a language. Whatever that means to you, if that means coming up with 4 or 5 words that are specific to that race, fine. Slurs, curse words are great because people tend to love to come up with those, and they're kind of fun. It's like, think of like Star Trek or Lord of the Rings or something like that. They have their slurs and stuff that they throw in there, and they get around the censors and all that because it's not a real word, but even though everybody knows what it means, right? The other thing to think about as well is what kind of government do these people have? Are they, especially if they're an alien race, right? So do they have one united government? Are they a fractured government like we are? Are they an anarchy? Are they a monarchy? So again, think about how that works out, because that way too, then you can kind of have a caste system, which is kind of fun for people to play with, especially us authors. You get to kind of play around with, your upper class, your lower class, your working class. Think about all the great fantasy novels. They all have them, and even in things like Babylon 5, right? You had the Minbari had a caste system, and we think of them as being super evolved, but they had, because of their caste system, they had trouble, right? So it's just something to think about as well. And again, it gives you opportunity to play, and that's what all this is about. When you're creating these fantasy worlds or these sci-fi worlds or these sci-fi races or whatever, give yourself opportunity to play with these characters. Make them different, make them your own, make them unique, make them colorful. Fill out the rainbow, right? Give them a little bit of everything, and that way you're not stuck to just one type of character, right? You have all this diversity and all this great stuff that you can play with. Another thing, and my last tip, and this is kind of the big one that I don't think a lot of people think about. Well, I think they're starting to now. It's becoming a little bit more important. How do these characters interact with nature? And what I mean by that is, do they only take, right? They go in and use up all the resources, and then when they're gone, and then they move on to something else? Or do they have some kind of balance, right? Where, yes, they use resources, but they do things like, kind of like what we're starting to get into now. You have where for every tree that you take down, you plant 2 or 3. You do fish farms, those types of things where we're not completely destroying our environment, which is what we used to do. We've kind of gotten into a little bit, not great, but we're getting there, right? We're starting to pay attention to those things. Or do they leave nature better than what it was? Do they work with nature, right? So when you think of like working with nature, think of like elves, right? And they're the perfect example of this. They go in and they work with nature. You look at all their architecture and their design and everything like that, and it's always incorporates nature. So it just works together. Anyway, so those are some tips and tricks for creating characters and creating races that I really hope help you out. Remember, just have fun with it. Just go out there and be creative. Anyways, that's everything I've got for today. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye!